Hi everyone, now we are going to look at one-to-one mapping. Before that, I have refactored the code in the Spring application in such a way that we can see it clearly. What I mean is, the person object is created as part of another method where I have set all the setters and getters and written the object. And we are directly saving it here, and at the same time, we are printing person by ID, and this is also abstracted to a new method and where it prints everything in the logs. And at the same time I added delete also, and I added print person by ID as well. And I have created employment entity and which has a ID, name, employment ID, city and state. And I created repository as well. So these are the additional changes which I made to demonstrate one-to-one mapping. So now we have a saved object, and after that we need to create a employment object, and we need to link person object and employment object as one-to-one relationship. What I mean is, one person can have one employment. So we will be looking at the unidirectional, means person to work, and we will check later as work to person as well. So if we get the employment object, and from this one we can get the person object as well. So that is called as one-to-one bidirectional. First we will be looking at unidirectional. So let's create the employment. I'm calling it as a work, and I'm annotating it one-to-one. And let's observe what exactly it contains. The cascade, fetch type, mapped by, optional, orphan removal, and target entity. Orphan removal means if any unlinked objects are there, so those will be deleted. Optional says that whether it needs to be maintained or not. So mapped by, this is used for the bidirectional one, and the fetch, you already aware of it, it has by default eager. And the cascade, cascade is the one which we need to know, because as part of the cascade we have multiple are there. We are going to check persist, merge, remove. These are all the most commonly used, and typically people will be set as cascade all. Persist means when we create a person object and we set the work object on person object, then it saves both of them even though we are not calling employment repository. And merge means if we are updating employment using employment repository and we are updating person using person repository, then when I call the save, so both will be saved in a single session. So that is called merge. And the remove means if I delete the person object, the associated work object also will get deleted. That is remove. So for our demonstration, let's keep all. Let's go to our application and create a work object and set on person. I have created the work object and I am setting it on person. So the employment object has been created as a work and it set it at person object using set work method. So when I save it, save all the files. When I save the person object, as we set the one-to-one relationship as cascade all, as we set the cascade all, it's going to save employment as well. Not only the person object, even the employment entity will be saved into the database. Let's run the application. First of all, let's check the create tables. So we have the employment table is created and person table, and it created a foreign key, and foreign key is created on work ID and refers to employment. So it's going to link employment dot ID links to work ID, so which is created here, work ID unique. So one person will be associated with one employment entity. While saving it, let's word wrap so we can see all of them together. While saving the person object, the employment object also been saved and it's been set for the work ID. And when we print it, person data by ID, now we have the work also, work, employment and the company. All the information has been fetched because one-to-one mapping fetch type is eager by default. So it fetched the employment object as well along with the person object. So while deleting it, when I'm deleting the person object, so it deleted from the person table and employment table as well. Why it deleted employment also? Because we set the cascading type as all and one of them is delete. So when the person object is deleted, associated employment object also will get deleted. So this is unidirectional. What I mean is, from the person we access the work while fetching the data. What I mean is, while printing the person object, we are calling person.get. By default it is toString method. As part of the person toString, we added the work. So it is fetching from person to the work. This is unidirectional. If I fetch the employment object from employment repository and if I can fetch the person from the employment, then it is called bidirectional. So let's create the bidirectional. So for that one, I'm going to use person. Here also we need to provide one-to-one mapping, but we need to use additional one, which is a mapped by. And here we need to give the property name that was referenced for one-to-one of employment. So here we used work. So we need to use exactly the same as work. Now it becomes bidirectional. So let's add the setters and getters. And please don't update toString method with person object, because person object also we are calling inside the toString method the work. So it become loop. So we should be very careful while printing it in the toString methods. Typically, we don't include any of these mappings into toStrings, but for our convenience, I added here. And as part of the print employment, I am printing employment and the person together. So in the same manner, let's update the print person also by taking out the work from here. So now we are going to print get employee by person. So here I will be calling dot get work. So this way we are safer, avoid the loops. Now after saving the person, let's get the employment also. So I'm printing print employment and I'm giving 1L. So here I'm saying print employment. So it is nothing but we are printing employment here and we are accessing person object from the employment using one-to-one bidirectional. So save all the files and run the application. And if you observe here, we are fetching the employment repository by ID, and here we have both employment and the person, both has been fetched. So this is how the bidirectional one-to-one mapping works. And how can you say that this is a bidirectional? Because if you observe the selection query, so here it says from employment object and it left joins the person table. But in case of the person, while fetching the person, it is from person table and left joins the employment. This way we can say that the one-to-one mapping, this is unidirectional from person to the employment, and here the employment to the personal, which we call it as bidirectional. So let's check other properties. What I mean is, when we are creating the person table, we are using as a work ID. So I don't want to create as a work ID. Instead, so I would like to change the work ID into employment ID. So how can we do that? So here we need to use join column. As part of the join column, It has all relationships. So first of all, the name. So here I want to say it as EMP underscore ID. So employment ID. And here it's going to reference column name. Means I need to give where exactly it will be mapped to. So I need to give in the employment, this is the ID which I need to map. So here I will be saying ID. So when we rerun the application, now the work ID is renamed as employee ID at the table. So let's run the application and let's go to the creation of the table. In the creation of the table, it created EMP underscore ID as we gave in the join column, and foreign key also been updated accordingly. This is how we are going to rename the join column. Now let's look at how orphan removal will work as part of the one-to-one mapping. Here, as part of the one-to-one mapping, we have one option called orphan removal. So what exactly this orphan removal is? Let's demonstrate the same. After saving and printing the person and employments, I set the person object with work as null. That means the employment object I have been taking out the relationship. So by setting as null. And when I save it, what happens to the employment? So to know that, let's print the employment also as part of. Now when we run the application, here the person object, the employee ID is been set with null, and as part of the person, from the person the employment data is null, and from the employment the person data is null. So both bidirectional it's working, but what happens to the employment ID? As it is a one-to-one mapping and one person should have only one employee, and here even though person object relationship has been set to null, still the employment object exists. Now this employee is called as orphan because it doesn't have any relationship. Yes, right now we are having bidirectional, but in case of the unidirectional, then this become orphan. So how are you going to avoid these orphans? In case of the unidirectional, we can set here as orphan removal. So I'm setting it from person to employment. It can be same from employment to person as well, but right now we are going to demonstrate as it is a unidirectional just for our understanding purpose. So now I have set the orphan remover, and whenever the employment object is been set to null, in our case the work property is been set to null, then the associated object will get deleted. So let's run the application. Now let's check it, and whenever the person object is been updated with null, the delete employment is also been triggered. So this is orphan removal. So when you are trying to print it, look at the person repository. While fetching the person data has been captured, but not the employment. And while fetching the employment, we got employment object is missing. So no employment data for ID 1 because the employment object has been deleted as we set the orphan removal as true at one-to-one mapping of person entity. Thank you.